be on, and then there. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll have a moment of silence or prayer. Okay, roll call. James Spillane is here. Karen Cody's here. Ian Scott's here. Troy Hopkins here. Dave Carbone is here. Kevin Vervil's here. Earl Levesque is here. Bill Von Hassel's here. Steve Giovanelli's here. Zach Langlaw is here. And Andy Robertson is excused absence. He is not going to be able to make it tonight, but he did let Jan know. Do we have any citizens' comments to start us off?
An extra budget for the audience.
I can, indeed. I had a couple extras here.
One as well.
It's Troy and Katie, thank you.
Here you go. And,
Thank you.
here you go. Everybody else has one, right? Do we have any citizens' comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Verville,
I'll move the minutes of March 29th, 2016 as written.
do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, they've been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? I'm going to lead off the discussion, actually. Mr. Verville was kind enough to point out to me that,
This is the March, this is the spring.
oh, this is
Last
spring
one.
one, okay.
This is the one we didn't do last time.
That's right, okay. Never mind. I won't lead off the discussion on that one. Does anybody else have any comments on this one? Corrections, anything that was omitted that you know about? Okay, then we'll call for a vote on those minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Abstain.
And
Abstained.
we have two abstain. Okay, hold on. Again, I'm taking notes because of our need to get the minutes out. And,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Verville,
I'll move the minutes of September 20th, 2016 as written.
that's the set I need to talk about. They've been moved, or do we have a second on those?
Second.
They've been moved and seconded. All right, do we have any discussion? And again, I'm gonna say I'm gonna lead off on discussion on that. Mr. Verville was kind enough to point out to me that we did not note on there that the two absences were considered unexcused absences because there was no notification made ahead of time, so we need to correct the minutes to consider the absence of Karen Cody and Carol Levesque unexcused absences. And a reminder that if you're going to be absent, please notify the board so we can consider it excused. Any other discussion on the minutes?
I've got a few, I guess, points I'd like to discuss.
You are free to talk about them here.
You placed a copy of the agenda, and I sent you an email about this, on the town's website without marking it as draft or unapproved minutes. I think that's a little deceiving to the taxpayers because it does appear that those have been approved and that those have not been voted or acted on by the board.
Okay, and legally, those are a legal first set of minutes.
Shouldn't they be watermarked as a draft set of minutes?
They're not considered a draft set of minutes. They are the initial set of minutes, and then the detailed minutes that we vote on are the ones that we're approving.
Okay.
They, in order to comply with the law for the ability to have those minutes out within the time frame, they have to comply with certain things, which is they have to show, the minutes are basic, they have to show who was present, who was absent, any major things that were discussed, and any decisions that were come to. Those are the 4 parts of the RSA. And by taking notes on what we do here now, and then me sending those as the minutes and getting them posted, we are in compliance with the law. And that is considered an official minutes, because it is the first. Keep in mind, too, that even when we have a set of minutes, like this detailed set that we're talking about now, that we discuss and have corrections to, we don't actually go and amend those minutes, we append them with the
Okay.
changes. So the initial set is still there, and there's no changes actually made to it. We don't pull it offline and then put a new set online. They get amended.
Okay. So, another, I guess, question or comment is, during the discussion regarding the $25,000 additional money that was added to the school district's supplies line, it was stated that, by Mr. Verville, that the purpose was to eliminate sending home the supply list at the beginning of the school year. I just want to correct the minutes, because if you go back to December 17th, Mr. Verville's minutes, and I can read it to you very briefly. As Chairman Verville states, this motion does not include discontinuing the list. That is an administrative school board decision. So I just want to make sure that that is corrected and added to the minutes.
So noted. We will make sure that that gets appended to the minutes.
Jim, would it help if I took minutes for you and just sent them?
That would be a great help, Katie. I've been asking for someone to volunteer to do that kind of thing here.
I'm doing my own, which will be basically yours. If I have to ask a question, I will.
I would appreciate it. I'll still take minor notes here and make sure that we agree, but I would really appreciate it, because it'll keep me from having to interrupt the meeting to keep writing things down. I appreciate that very much. Anybody else have discussion on the minutes? Did you have anything else that you noticed that was
That's all I wanted
off?
to comment on.
Okay. Any other comments, corrections, or omissions? Everyone's name was spelled right this time. That's always a big one. Okay, we'll take a vote on that one then. All in favor of the minutes as amended
Aye.
It's called correct.
or corrected?
I wasn't here for the
You can abstain,
initial, so I would probably abstain.
but we'll say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed,
Abstain, I wasn't here.
and 2 abstains,
Yep.
or 3 abstains, okay?
I was here for the original,
Yep,
but not for the amendment.
that's fine if you want to abstain on it, yep.
They were emailed out.
Okay, moving on then, our minutes have been approved. The detailed minutes will now be posted in addition to those initial minutes. I know it's a new thing we're doing, but it's only to comply with that law. So there will be the initial minutes plus our detailed minutes, and they mesh, and they should be fine, because the initial ones are very brief. And Jan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or no? Okay. We'll go on to old business.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, because we've got some newer members and maybe some people that aren't aware, the reason that the attendance is tallied as excused and unexcused is because by RSA, if a member misses 4 meetings in a row unexcused, they no longer are a member of the committee. So 4 unexcused absences in a row legally requires the removal of that member from the committee. So I just want everybody to know that that's a legal requirement, and that's why it's tallied. And I forget the exact RSA, and if members have questions, I would steer them to the Secretary of State's office website, and you can find that, or perhaps the chairman has a copy at home.
I have-
Kevin, what about the excused?
Excused does not count.
Yeah, it's only unexcused. Four
It's only unexcused
unexcused absences
Yeah.
requires removal from the committee, so that's the only reason I just want to make sure everybody's aware of what the rules are.
And some committees might be less lenient, we're very lenient. All we require is that you tell us ahead of time you can't make it, and we put it down as excused absence. So an email popped over sometime, and I checked my email right before I left work. There were no emails saying anybody was gonna be absent on my way here, so, no emails, no phone calls. That means, you know, tonight Andy had contacted Jan, so he's a excused absence. We're all set with that. Okay, old business. Do we have any, old business anybody needs to discuss?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
I
Verville?
was wondering if Member Langloss could walk us through the spreadsheet that he provided to the committee via the chair.
Did everyone receive that? I emailed that out. There was our AP report and the spreadsheet that Mr. Langlois sent out. I believe he's got copies. Here we go.
They are squeezed to try to work and fit onto a single page, but
I couldn't open the spreadsheet.
Do you have Excel?
Yes,
Do you have Excel 2012?
yes.
you know what, I do not know what version it was created on by the school.
No, I
so-
mean, I couldn't even like try to open it, like I couldn't even click on it,
Weird.
yeah. I didn't have a lot of time to.
Obviously,
find out
Kevin
about
got it and printed it out, but
Well, you know,
I don't know. I
Could be
I
my
can look-
browser.
I could look into it. It might be the browser that was
I'll
used to
let you know.
access the email. Okay. So, yeah, we have some lines cropped off and things so that you could fit it all on the page. Do you want to go ahead and walk us through that?
So I guess, first thing is year-to-date, all right, let me correct that, year to the 18th, we're at $18,201, which is approximately 31% spent. This is essentially paper, pens, everyday supplies, consumables.
And when you say year to present, that is the school year, not the fiscal year.
Yes.
We'll just make that
Yep.
clear.
Yep.
'Cause I want to make sure everybody understands we're talking about the school year.
Yes,
31%, not just till December.
correct, correct.
Could you give me that line item number?
It's not got a number. Do you have a copy of the spreadsheet we can share?
So I think I printed a few extras.
It's the very final line on the last page, Harriet. Very back. Okay, and you said that was 31%?
Yeah, 30.8, I believe. is what it
30.8.
Calculated out to. But this is our day-to-day consumables. So a large portion of it goes to WB Mason, there's other vendors. I can try to answer questions if there is any.
I had a question, what is the original balance of that?
59,000.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Langlois,
Yes.
it would be great in the future if, when you're resizing these lines to print, I know that on our spreadsheet, we can actually expand it and see the whole thing. But the one that you printed out for the audience,
Yep.
if they look down line memo item, which is gonna tell them what the thing was,
I did-
a
I
lot of it
didn't-
just says general.
I didn't catch that, unfortunately.
Yeah, they probably don't care about the account, so we could probably squish the account number down to
Until
nothing.
I printed that off as I was running out of the
Okay.
office today, so I apologize. That was an error on my
Thank you.
behalf. Bill?
Yeah, I had a question, does this cover just supplies to the students, or?
This is
everything?
schools supplies,
For the staff, for everybody?
staff, students.
Students?
You know, it can be computer keyboards, it can be mice, it can be papers and decals and
Okay,
consumables for the classroom. It is everything.
okay. I questioned only because there was a at-length discussion about student supplies.
And they are.
Wasn't
That's,
sure
that's what this question was
whether-
answering.
Yep, and they were certainly included in that.
But
Okay.
what would not be included in that would be janitorial supplies.
Those fall into a different line.
Right, okay. Any other questions on this spreadsheet? Everybody's free to open it and see what the actual memo item is, if you can get at it, and
Does any of this go out to bid?
There is, Because of the dollar amounts, it doesn't necessarily have to go through the formal bid process, but pricing is researched by the staff to make sure that they're getting the best bang for the buck on everything.
What is the rule to go out to bid?
That's a question for the school board,
Yeah.
not for us.
It's,
I don't know if I know that.
I don't have the policy in front of me, so I apologize. But if I recall correctly, it is dollar amounts of 10,000 or greater go out to a regular traditional sealed bid.
Yep,
I believe it is, and again, I can pull the policy for the next meeting if that's helpful, but I believe it's 5 to 10,000, requires 3 written.
yep, 3 competitors.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
I had a question. How does this compare to this time last year?
I would have to check that for you, I didn't pull that information.
I didn't know if we were on track with previous years or,
I can most certainly
Yes.
find out for you.
yep, okay.
Okay, well,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Mr. Verville?
So, I suppose we'll have to be very careful with language this year, because I thought the request was clear and understood, but I'm not sure it was. So, the discussion during the last meeting revolved around the fact that there was lengthy discussion during last year's cycle about fully funding consumables, student consumables. And I certainly don't want to go through those minutes, through those recordings, and cherry pick paragraphs, sentences, lines, etc. The intent of the motion was pretty clear, was to fully fund consumables so that mandatory or strongly recommended requests for classroom supplies wouldn't go out. It seemed, at the time, it seemed understood by the school board. It seemed understood by the administration. The line was funded, had 2 votes. But the policy didn't seem to be put into practice. And that's fine. The school board can choose to not do that. I totally get that. And so I guess where there's confusion on my part is how some grades, some teachers chose this year not to send letters, so presumably all their consumables were ordered through some portion of this spreadsheet, while other teachers kept with the tradition of making the request despite the line item being fully funded for all consumables. So going forward this year, we're going to reconsider that line item, right, as we reconsider every line in the budget. And so the request was not for the bottom line. The request in the last meeting, and certainly the non-verbatim notes aren't gonna pick this up, but if anybody wants to go back to the tape, they can listen to it and see. The request really was, what is the delta between the previous year's spend before the line item was increased to fully fund student consumables versus this year's? In other words, what products at what amounts were added and which weren't? That was the request. This sheet is good for the bottom line, but it tells very, very little information as far as the supplies that were inquised upon. So what I'm really looking for is to know, of the extra $25,000 that was added to the budget with the intent of fully funding student consumables, all right, what is the additional spend this year versus previous years? That's really what we're looking to find out. Because if you've decided for whatever reason that you're going to fund consumables 55% rate versus 50% rate, of what's consumed versus what's requested from parents and guardians, then the line needs to be readjusted. The $25,000 was not put in there to pay for deoxic screen cleaner and other, if you go through here, there's a lot of.
Toner cartridges.
Toner cartridge, elastic beading cord, I get that, right? That's an art supply. But the question is that the same every year? I find paint, right? I found the tempera paint. I can tell by the colors that that's what it is. So that really is the question, so that when we come back to that line item, we can make an informed decision as to how best fund that line item. Otherwise, it's just sort of a guess. And if I'm just gonna guess at a number, I'm gonna guess at a really small number. And the reason I'm gonna guess at a really small number is not because I don't think that the school should be providing consumables to students. Clearly I do. But we turn back hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and I get a lot of pressure from constituents saying, you never find savings anywhere. And I took an awful lot of pressure for what I describe as fully funding that line. And then the school board, at its discretion, I totally get it. You guys manage the school, have chosen not to follow that policy. But if you're not gonna follow that policy, I'm gonna move to take that money back out. Because that money is not for new and better equipment, it's for direct student service, consumable items. And so that's the information that I'm looking for. And I thought that was expressed quite clearly, but I must be mistaken. So I hope that information can be made available without, going through the exercise of motions and seconds and votes to require it. But I'll ask Mr. Langloss, Member Langloss, if he'll do that or not.
Would you like him to answer first?
I'm not quite sure what needs to happen since.
Well,
Mr.
he had a
Darrow
question
addressed
for
it.
Mr. Langlois. I'd take his answer for the question first, unless yours was on the same, okay.
It's in relation, but there may be no responses.
Mr. Langlois.
So, I guess, Kevin, that is not what I gathered out of our last conversation. What I gathered out of our last conversation is what was spent out of the line, which is what was provided tonight. The line originally was seeded with $34,000. The budget committee added $25,000, bringing the total to $59,000. So we have not, as was indicated in the last meeting, misspent the money. We haven't spent the money. We haven't.
Nobody said it's been misspent.
Actually, that, I believe, was in the minutes. Well, I can reference that if I need to. And so, if you'd like a breakdown of exactly what was purchased with that $18,201.40, I can pull the individual requisitions and we can provide that, if that's what you're asking for.
That is not what I'm asking for.
And if you're asking for a year-to-date comparison, but I'd rather you ask a question so we can give you a direct answer as to what are you looking for information, and then we will provide that. But you're skirting around a little bit, so if you could redirect that to a certain extent so that we can provide you with the information you're looking for, we will.
Second. Ms. Hopkins?
I believe that you're convoluted in what you're requesting because consumables is attached to a multitude of things in the school system, including something like Handwriting Without Tears, which is a consumable workbook or resource for the children. So I don't believe those are the kind of consumables you mean, so that may need some clarification on that. Perhaps if you had stated exactly the types of items you believe that the school board should set aside for non-purchasing, that may clarify. But as the school is addressing some of the things that are used every day by teachers, those are also consumables and therefore cannot be really related to this money that you're trying to find out about.
Are you asking me a question or just making a statement?
I'm just commenting on your pontifications.
Well, the consumables is, I'm sorry.
Hold on, we've got Bill first.
Mr. Chairman, it seems as though there's a gross misunderstanding on both of the individuals here. Mr. Verville thought that the money was going to be used for one thing, the school decided to use it for something else. Some teachers sent out notes, some teachers did not. Was it clearly communicated to the teachers that there was this fund for student consumables?
The teachers were aware that that line had been
But
increased.
were they communicated?
Yes.
That they did not have to send out letters to the parents or guardians requesting consumables?
I would defer that question or like to confirm that with the administrators, but I believe that to be correct.
Okay. So, going forward, knowing what Mr. Verville is looking for in the way of allocating consumables, pens, paper, notebooks, so forth and so on, is there, some way to communicate to the school, we don't want this line item being used for toner cartridges, and yes, it may be a consumable item,
That is,
but it's not a student
Yeah.
consumable
But that is
item.
what-
If I may, I'm not saying that anybody has misspent.
No, I'm not,
anything.
and
Can
I'm not
Can I just
implying.
finish, just allow me to
Hold
finish real
on.
quick?
Let Mr. Verville
The-
respond, and then you can go back to your.
The only part that I'm after are direct student supplies, okay? And I can't give a concrete list because I don't know what that list is. I've gotten lists from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. So there is a spend on those classroom supplies year on year on year. That's what we're talking about. We're not.
How much
we're-
is it?
We're not talking about anything else. So the increase was meant to allow for an increase of that spend so that the items on the send home list wouldn't have to be solicited for. That was the intent. The school does not have to do that. I get that. And you can spend the money any way you want. All I'm looking for is what is the difference in the spend on those items, the items that are found on the classroom solicitations last year versus this year. That's what I'm looking to find out. I don't want the entire consumables list. I get that. That's not the part. The only part I'm interested in are direct student supplies.
Mr. Von Hassel.
And if I had been allowed to continue, my suggestion would have been, and is, to perhaps carve out another line item in that budget that says specifically student consumables versus just general consumables.
And that would have been my
That
suggestion
would
too.
have been
That was where I
a
was
way
headed with it
to
next.
make sure that the students' consumables are trackable.
Or a subline.
A subline are
Which-
trackable in the budget.
which we can most certainly look at when we start reviewing the budget, because that line item has always been used for the building's consumables.
General consumables.
General
Which,
consumables.
So it would
which
make
is
it easier to
fine.
have this conversation, probably.
It'd be easier to track if there was a separate line item in the budget for student consumables, not just general consumables. It'd be easier for everybody to track, and there wouldn't be an issue. Well, hopefully, there wouldn't be an issue.
Ms. Hopkins.
I still believe you'd need further clarification on the word student consumables, because as a child goes to school every day, they consume things all day long. So this would have to be your requested list of student consumables at start of year. We'd have
Let's
to
make a
line
list.
item it specifically
I'm almost
if you're
certain
looking
that-
for that target.
I'm almost certain that students are not using cleaner on whiteboards. and
Probably not chemicals, but they're
probably
certainly
not.
involved with the toner that's being used for printers, because that relates to something they may need or print out for a project or a slideshow.
I think we're getting
Or
off
something
in
they're
the
doing.
I think, yeah,
Let's-
I think,
that, we're not gonna solve any of that here.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Verville.
if I may. I've never seen a letter go home looking for toner cartridges. I mean, I don't know how else to state this more clearly. Personally, what I'm getting back, I feel like, is stonewalling because people don't want to provide the answer. Now, I'm not saying that's you, Mr. Langlois, because I don't think you've had the opportunity to really clearly answer. My request to the school is to provide the spend on the things that students consume in a classroom, as is found on the requests that go home for materials. what that spend is, those items, the total nut of those items, whatever that laundry list is, pre-K through 8, that goes home on those letters, what we spent on those types, because what we were told is we buy some pencils, we don't buy all the pencils. We buy some pens, we don't buy all the pens. I want to know, what's the spend on those last year? What's the spend this year? And I'm going to assume, unless the school wants to come with clarification, and I would welcome it and invite it, to say, by the way, though, we did increase art 10% year on year as a policy decision to beef up art supplies or musical instruments or whatever that spend is. I'm looking to find out what it costs for the grade levels that did not send letters home. That's what I'm after. I just want to ask Mr. Langlois, is my request clear? Do you understand the number I'm looking for, or no?
I understand what you're looking for, I just don't know to what extent do you extrapolate that out? Are we including tissues? Are we including wipes? Are we including paper towels?
Anything that gets sent home as a home request to come into the classroom in a home letter, so if those things are included, then yes, they should be included. Now, perhaps the paper towel spend is not 100% for the classroom. Perhaps the cafeteria uses some significant fraction of paper towels. The cafeteria does not send home letters, so I would assume we could do a good job at estimating and breaking out that amount of material.
Ms. Levesque first?
Kevin, you said you knew of different classrooms that had sent home a list of whatever they needed, 10 items or whatever. So when you read the list, what was the common things that you saw for, grades 1 through 4, if that's what you're aware of?
Okay, so personally, I only get one grade list because my children share a grade. The fact that requests went home, I'm aware of those requests because constituents have contacted me and said, geez, we got a supply request again this year. So perhaps it would be beneficial to all the members of the committee if Mr. Langlois could get copies of the various letters that went home from the various grades for this year. I believe most of those can be found online, but I would think the administration is aware of what's going home and could quickly make a set of copies for the committee, and then we could review it in
So,
detail.
in the 4th grade letter, or whatever grade your children are in, what did you see on their request? What was their items that they were requesting?
There was no letter for the 4th grade.
Okay, so you didn't get a letter this year, or?
Correct.
Okay. You probably received a letter last year?
I did, and the year
Okay.
before, and the year before that.
Right. What were the common things that you saw in those letters?
There were requests for pencils, colored pencils, pens, rulers, erasers, various and sundry classroom items.
Okay, so what you're looking for is something along that line? Is that a correct assumption?
So to refresh the memory of the committee, during the discussion last year, the way I came at the $25,000 was I took the 3rd grade list that we received, that I received. I attached full retail value to fully supply the list. I assumed it to be an average, and I multiplied it by 500. So I assumed the spend to be roughly the same for every student. 500 students, the number came out to more or less $25,000. There was discussion whether that number was too large, that number was too small. Nobody made any motion to alter it. Granted, I would say the number was too large because it was based on full retail value and not the commercial buying power that the school enjoys. So certainly, one would have expected that not only could the list have been fully funded, but could have been fully funded with very high-quality materials. So I just want to know how much of that money was used this year for that purpose. That's what I'm trying to get at.
So you're looking for those various items that were on, similar to what was on your list?
That were on the list that were sent home by the school.
Mr. Langlois, did you have anything to add to that?
I will request and see if we can pull the information you'd like out of the individual requisitions, but it is going to take an enormous amount of time to do that. But if that is the wish of the committee, we will proceed with it.
That's administratively ridiculous. The amount of time and energy it would take to do that,
Huge.
considering how this stuff is tracked. You gotta pick apart every PO. It's not a way to get to the information.
Mr. Von Hassel, it's your turn.
I just think that at this point in time, we need to put the past behind us. I think it would be an administrative nightmare to try and break out
Agreed
every single
completely.
pencil, ruler, toner cartridge, whatever. But I think that going forward, we need to be extremely specific about what we are appropriating money for, whether it's this particular situation or any particular situation. I think that we need to be very specific going forward and saying, you know, I don't think we can sit here and say we want pencils, rulers, blah, 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 blah. Those are pretty much the things that the school determines. We don't determine that, we're just the municipal budget.
My sense of the will of the committee at this point is that we will not require you to go digging through all of the administrative
Mr. Chairman?
records at this point.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Verville.
So, we've got some strong opinions on what the relative accounting workload to do this would be. There's been no request to the people that actually do this to verify how much work it would or would not be. So I would request that the request be made and allow the people that do the bookkeeping on this at least a crack at it, because in offline discussions, I have been led to believe that this would not be such a monumental task.
Let me direct Mr. Langlois to ask his accounting people to give us an estimate of what it would take them and to report back to us in November what the workload would be, and we can make a decision at that point whether the ends justify the means to dig through all of that information. Is that acceptable?
Well, I'm a little bit nervous because we've decided as a committee to become very language specific, and so I'm afraid that that request will then get sent to the SAU accounting office, which I do not believe, it's my opinion, that that is not the most appropriate place to get this answer. That
And
in
I would
fact-
agree with you. The SAU is not where we're talking
that
about.
in fact, the person at building level that does most of this purchasing, I will bet, has a very good feel for what the spend is for various items, especially given the longevity and professionalism of the employees in that school. I find it hard to believe, if it was a new person in any of those roles, I would say yes, perhaps that would be a daunting task. But given the years of service and familiarity and the year in, year out consistency of a pre-K through 8 school, I would be amazed to find out if the request was all that burdensome.
One more thing before you get on there, Bill, because I haven't had a chance to say anything yet. I'd like to make a suggestion and get the feeling of the committee as well on trying to come to terms with a concrete list of what items we would consider falling under this second line item of student consumables. And as such, I think that the good place to start would be to dig up the lists that were sent home last year, not this year, because every classroom sent one home last year. And if we could make a master list of all the sub-lists from last year, then we would have a comprehensive list of the types of materials that were requested for the entire school for each grade level, and we could use that as a starting point to be able to say, these are the things that we want to see broken out in this second line item so that we can find out if the consumables are being consumed properly and that the money is being spent that we are allocating for student consumables to prevent the list from going home in the appropriate place. How does the committee feel about that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna withdraw my request, and I'm gonna change my request. Is it possible to get a copy of all the requests that went home last year and all the requests that went home this year. If I can get the 2 stacks of letters, I'll simply go home and do the math myself. Is that something that the school board can provide us without overburdening the staff?
I can request it from the administration, but to that extent, the school board doesn't proof or see the lists prior to them going home.
I'm sure they've got copies somewhere, though.
I can ask.
And how does the committee feel about trying to get hold of these master lists from last year so that we can then?
And this year, so I can
And
compare
this
to
year.
find out what the
This year's
difference
fine
is.
as well. If we can get hold of those for the committee. I don't think that this committee wants to go through those lists and say, that's what it is, we'd like to see them, and then we'd leave it up to the discretion of the school board to sort of say, yep, we consider these student consumables, make your line item, because it's your line item, create one if you can, so that we can then fund that line item fully if we can do so. And I think that will add clarity and avoid a lot of the discord that's going on and allow us to come to a result with a lot less argument.
Yeah, do it better next time.
Mr. Von Hassel now.
That was going to be my comment, really. I mean, at this point, it really appears to be closing the barn door after the horse is out. I think that any request for additional information is pretty much nice to know, but we can deal with this issue when the new budget is presented to us. And we can deal with the issue at that point in time. And given the discussions that we've had back and forth here, I would hope that the school department or the school district would put in a separate line item for student consumables so that we can work on that line. At this point, I don't know what the end game is here. I'm not sure what getting this information gets us to.
Well, I'd be more than happy to answer that if you'd like.
Mr. Verville.
So there was money put in for a purpose. The purpose is not fully executed. I'm simply trying to get at what fraction of the purpose was executed so that the line can be readjusted this year to reflect what the actual acting policy of the school district relative to this topic is. I guessed at a number last year, and we approved it. They chose not to spend it for the purpose. I'm going to choose to not leave it in the budget because they're not spending it for the purpose that it was intended.
And I'm gonna
But I
again
don't, hold on, but I don't know how much to readjust by until I know what they spent this year versus last year. I have to know that number. Otherwise, I have to guess at the number. And if I have to guess at the number, well, that's not very good practice.
Mr. Von Hassel, and then Mr. Langwell.
How about when they present their school budget with the line item in there, they also tell us how much was spent in that line item?
Because the
Then
only
we
part of the
can-
line that I'm interested in is direct student consumables.
That's what this line would be,
No, but that,
Separate line.
as a separate line item
Or
in
a
the budget.
subline. I don't know if
Going
you guys
forward,
can do
not
subline.
going backwards.
But, yeah.
that would be a proposed budget for next year. That would not give us insight into what they're doing this year. That would simply be a proposed number going forward.
May I ask a question? What can we do about what they're doing this year? They have the appropriation, the entities are allowed to manage to the bottom line and move things around and spend the appropriations as they will. And you know what? In the end, we have 2 committees, the select committee and the school board, that make those decisions to move those appropriations and alter the spending where they see fit, as long as they're bound by that bottom line. So no matter what we find out, there is nothing we have the power to do it. We are not an enforcement committee. We're not here to look backwards and punish people. And, I mean, we can simply state, hey, we thought it was for this, but it was that, and we can move forward and do it better next time, so we have a separate line, so that in the event the appropriation is moved for something else, people will know, and it'll reflect in their vote for the next school budget. But we really can't do anything about what's already there.
Nobody's trying to do anything about what's already there, other
So
than to
look
find.
forward then, and it'll go faster and smoother.
I can't look forward and readjust a number unless I know what was spent.
Bring the argument down, please.
I make a motion that we move on this for now. We've had some discussion, we can reflect on it.
We've got requests to Mr. Langlois to provide 2 distinct things, the lists if you can.
That's all I'm
Actually,
interested
3
in.
things. Historical data from the previous year at the same time for these
I believe Mr. Verville rescinded that request and
The only
requested
thing I want to see are the go-home list from last year and this year. If I get those two complete sets of lists, I'll have all I need to adjust the number.
The historical data of this list at the same time last year was actually asked by Mr. Von Hassel.
I apologize, sorry.
No problem.
So we've got a request for that. We were also asked to provide a new line item or sub-line item if possible. We would like to see that so that we can talk about this, comparing apples to apples, list items to list items. And then we have also requested that we get the list from last year that was sent home and the list from this year that was sent home. Those are the only three things that we have requested. I just want to summarize that because there was a lot of discussion. I want to make it clear. And we will now move on unless somebody who has not been heard from needs to have a comment weighed in. No. Okay, is there any other old business?
Can I ask you, was that a motion? or
What,
just
we need
the
to make a motion.
consensus of the committee
Yeah, we need to make a motion.
get those 3 items?
There was a request from the committee. I don't believe we need a formal motion from the committee to ask for that. It's just a request from the committee. The committee is here, no one's objected. We can just request that those things be
Actually, you
provided.
didn't put it out for a vote on the request.
No, we didn't put I'm saying we didn't need to put it out to a vote, in my
Is that-
opinion.
Okay.
It's just, if anybody objects to that, they can go ahead and speak. Ms. Hopkins?
I object to the request of finding the historical data. That's something that if a taxpayer wants to do, they can certainly look it up. It's online. And again, in relationship to what has been spent, needs to be spent, I'm not sure where we're headed here. We could look ahead for next year and decide what we would like to see happen or not happen, and it goes back to being a school board policy.
Okay, I would argue that the historical data from this sheet that was provided by Mr. Langlois, he had said he could easily grab from what the same time was last year, and when Mr. Von Hassel asked, there was no problem in doing that. So I didn't see it as a big issue.
Mr.
If we
Chairman?
want to go to a committee vote on these issues, we will go to a committee vote to make sure that we've got some authority behind us here.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the 3 items that you denoted as being requested by the MBC to the school board.
Seems like that might be the safest way to go.
Second.
We have a move, request that these 3 items be formally requested by the MBC, and a second. Do we have any discussion on that?
Who seconded?
Mr. Von Hassel? Seeing no discussion, all in favor that we request these 3 items from the Deerfield Community School Board, say aye.
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 Opposed? 2 opposed. And abstain, I didn't see anybody that didn't vote, so I'm going to assume there was no abstentions. All right. I believe that's all for old business. Nobody else had said they had anything else we needed to discuss for old business. We'll go on to new business. Boy, that took a while to get there. Jan, you've given us another copy of the budget worksheet. Was there anything that the Board of Selectmen wanted us to know about this one?
That is a draft of the 2017 budget,
Without backup.
without that.
Any addendums expected or adjustments?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Has-
I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead.
When would we get the final?
November 24th or 5th?
22nd, I think, was
Something
Yeah.
in there.
what the next,
November.
All right.
that was what we're scheduled online. It says that we're supposed to receive the
Yeah, exactly.
budget from there.
Yeah, so we can all-
So I'm going to assume that you've probably heard from every department, but not taken final votes on every department. Is that what we mean by,
Yes,
okay.
and,
And anything that comes up between now and then?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Von Hassel?
I have 2 requests of the town administrator. The first request is,
Should she go sit at the booth, or or are they quick ones?
well, they're probably pretty quick, but
Okay.
I mean, it's your call.
I just want to make sure she's heard for the TV if she needs to be.
Sure. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Von Hassel.
The first item I would like to request would be a list of the unanticipated expenditures that were not originally considered in this original budget for this year. And that would include, you know, emergency pieces of equipment or raises, and which department they came from and how much they were.
Okay.
And then, and we could use a cutoff figure of like $5,000, if that makes it a little bit more palatable.
Anything over $5,000?
Anything over $5,000 that was expended out of the budget,
Okay.
that was not originally appropriated, or, you know, anticipated, if you will, unanticipated costs. And the second request would be a list of the interdepartmental transfers of funds, or, again, we could set a $5,000 limit on those, a $5,000 floor, if you will, because I really want to see where this money is moving around from. I mean, I understand it's a bottom line budget, no problem.
The Board of Selectmen does not move money inside of our budget. We cover the money if a line is overexpended from another line.
Okay, I
And
would
what
like to.
what I can say today is if, for instance, sorry, my glasses, my miscellaneous line item, number 690 under TA, is overexpended. I can tell you today that I'm using line 111, which is the part-time
Part-time,
employee line. I'm going to use that, part of that to cover that.
Okay.
And if I come back to you next week, it may not even be the right line.
Okay.
I think that Mr. Von Hassel only wanted to know, not between lines within a department, but wanted to know if something got moved into town administration from, say, the police department, because,
No money is moved. The TA budget is there if it is, a line item is overspent or the bottom line is overspent. The Board of Selectmen know that it is overspent, and it is made up somewhere in another department, but never moved to that department for several reasons. One, if you're moving money from one to another and you go to the default budget, that's going to change your lines.
I see what she's saying, and I know what you're trying to get at. The money doesn't actually move, they just tell them, don't spend any more money in that department.
Right, so last year with the highway department, the sand and the salt were overexpended. We told the highway agent not to spend money from a couple of other lines to cover the money.
So, Bill, we could get at what you're looking at just by looking at any lines that were overspent, or any budgets that were departments that were overspent, because we would know that that money had to be suppressed somewhere else to make up the difference. Or are you looking for whose department did we suppress? Because,
Yeah, well, both. I'd like to see which department consistently is having money, or at least different allocations in the line items. Because, I mean, realistically, shouldn't we be adjusting those lines to be adequate in the first place, instead of having to go rob Peter to pay Paul?
absolutely, that's what we try to do.
Absolutely,
trying
but
to say.
if we, for instance, we put in the salt line, let's say we have $10,000.
Yeah,
We are putting 15 in for this 2017 budget. We go to the default, it goes to 10.
okay.
I don't know how else to do it. And Miss Katie, I'm not picking on you, but the supervisor's budget is overspent due to the Secretary of State's request for what they have to do. So that overage is going to have to be made up from some other budgets. So we know that we have X number of dollars that we cannot spend in the bottom line to cover it.
I understand that, and I I was wrong in thinking that there was a physical transfer.
No, there
But
is
basically,
not.
what you're just doing is reallocating
Correct.
to a different line item. Do you keep track of that, like, on a regular basis?
I'm watching the bottom line, I'm watching the department's bottom lines.
But, so, I mean, essentially, if you're covering up the sins of one line in the budget, we're not really getting an accurate picture of that, the expenditures in that line, I guess is where I'm going.
Well, in a way it is, because if
Okay.
you, I'll take a maintenance line. We budget X number of dollars, figuring this is what we're going to have to spend. We did not expect to have 2 leaks in the boiler room this year, and we already have. So Mark has had to pay for those, and the line is, I don't know how else to explain it.
No, I understand. I understand now better than
And
before as to
also,
what's going on.
this fall, before it freezes, they're going to have to do all repiping in the pump house. That wasn't expected. So,
I understand it better.
okay.
I mean, I really do.
I would
I
love to
guess-
say that the budget that we're presenting is golden. We're not going to have any issues.
I understand, but, you know, we've also been told a number of times that it's a bare bones budget. And yet, there always manages to be money available. Now, whether that gets shifted around
It
from
gets
other
shifted
lines.
around. If the bottom line is getting close to being
Yep.
scary, and we have November and December coming for the highway department,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we do have the warrant article that was approved. We can use some of the contingency money. But I can't tell you how many snowstorms we're going to have.
No, and I'm not
And-
looking for that, but
And-
I'm just trying to see if there's, I mean, if we have a line that constantly needs replenishing, because it's constantly,
Yes.
you know, inadequate, if you will. That's important, I think, for us to all know, so that going forward, we can make sure that's adequate,
And
and we don't have to rob from another line.
Might be available for that. If I may, Jan, how far out can you do budget to actuals, like on an Excel format? For past periods complete, like we have 15 budget to actual.
we usually do 3 years back, but
That's the only way, but if you want more further back, we can get further back.
A number of years with the accounts.
then
to
you'd
give
have
you the trends
historical
in.
overspends.
So you'd have trends,
But if they're,
and that's existing data, so it'd be easy to get complete periods.
it-
The problem with 16 is it's not complete till we're
yeah,
approaching the end of
So-
our
right,
work.
right.
So would a 10-year historical look back of actual versus budgeted allow you to see enough lines that were potentially overspent from their budgeted for you to be able to pull a trend out?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Verville?
I think in previous conversations relative to this type of topic, it would be ideal to get that 10-year data, especially,
so, too.
especially if we could get it in an Excel spreadsheet, because that makes doing a lot of the analysis a lot more simple than banging away on a Staples calculator like I am now.
Lord knows we always look at the 3 years we're given. 10 years would make it even more ideal, and we might be able to become more precise and make sure we fully fund budget lines that
And
might get
I'm-
overspent.
From what I know about how this stuff is usually stored, this type of information, it shouldn't be a administratively demanding
No, but if we
task.
do it in Excel, we lose all totals, except for the bottom line.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay,
I think we
We can mess
We
with that.
can put some formulas into Excel and
Some
make
stuff.
it work.
okay.
Maybe some subtotals or lookups or something exciting like that.
So, could I ask that, then, that a 10-year historical, is that what would work for you? A 10-year historical be sent to myself and the vice chair, and we will let the vice chair look at it, do some Excel magic if he needs to, and then we'll distribute it to the committee?
Okay, I want the board to remember, the departments can ask for the money. If it goes to default, it goes back.
Correct, and there was no way to looking at it, whether we were on a default or a regular budget at the given time.
Through the minutes, yes.
Right, but I mean, on the spreadsheet, there will be
No.
no indication, so
No.
people have to be aware that what you're looking at may be a default budget on that given year. You'd have to go look at the minutes to find out.
I can tell you for the last 10 years whether it was a default or a budgeted budget. Matter of fact, I gave that sheet out last year to this committee. I'll give it out again this year as we get a little bit closer. Mr.
Send that to the
Chairman?
chair and the vice chair, please.
Mr. Chairman? If we receive that spreadsheet, could we get it unmodified as you receive it? That way, whatever math we want to do, we can just do.
I'll just disseminate whatever we get from the town.
Sure.
Great, thank
I will send what we get from the town, but some people may want one that's already got the magic worked into it. So if they need that, they can ask us and we'll send you one that we've actually put the little additions and totals into, if we can do that.
Thank you, Mr.
I trust Jan will keep a master copy, read-only, so that if anybody fat fingers a few formulas,
It comes right out of the system.
Yeah.
Mr. Von Hassel, you needed to continue.
No, I think that's it, actually. Thanks, Jan, I appreciate. I mean, I just think, and I understand why you cover, you cover one line from another line. It's just, I just question whether we get an accurate picture of how that particular line is expended by basically refunding it from another line. Is all I'm saying.
If you ever want to know what is expended from a specific line, we can do a detail
Yeah.
of the line that you're looking at.
I think that might be an awful lot of work, but, I think, let's take a look at this 10-year thing, if it's not too much trouble, and let's see what we can, disseminate from that.
I will just put
That
this
works.
out right now so that you're aware of it. 2007, we were in the hole quite a bit due to the floods. And then in 2008, we weren't too much better.
Okay. Good information to have.
One of those years was the year we had to ask the MBC to provide extra money.
2007,
That's correct, okay.
yeah,
I remember that.
yes.
I was chair at the time, I think.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Verville,
Jan, forgive me, what's the fiscal year?
January through December,
It is, okay.
Yeah.
So we're 74% expended at
Correct.
more or less 74%
Right.
through the year, right?
yes.
Okay. I'm just looking at the numbers real quick, banging away here. The only things I'll say is, it represents a 4% increase over the 2016 budget, 4% in the bottom line. So if there's any large items, if the select representative could speak to those, that would be good. If it's just general inflation, 4%, then we'll pick through it. The budget, as it's outlined right now by the selectmen, represents a 4.3% increase over the 2015 budget as passed, but it represents a 17.3% over the actual spend of 2015. So just,
and let's keep in mind that this is a squishy budget at the moment.
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
We're probably only at, 70% accuracy on what we've been given before next month?
Yeah, the board hasn't approved anything.
Okay. Probably less than 70
It-
then.
The insurance rates aren't all up to date yet either. We haven't gotten them all.
That's a big one. Everybody knows that those are going up. Okay. Any other new business? Did anybody have any comments to follow on our request? And thank you, Jan, for stepping to the microphone. I'm glad we had you sitting over there for that.
Do we need to make a motion on that?
What's the feeling of the board? Do you want to make a motion for this request? Probably best if we do. Does
So
somebody-
moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Verville that we request the 10-year historical.
second it.
It's been seconded by Mr. Giovanelli. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Jane,
Okay.
So going back to 2009, Mr. Chairman, there's been 4 default budgets and 3 municipal budget committee budgets passed. So we're running close to 50-50 since 2009 on the municipal side.
We'll get it all the way to 2006, or 2000.
Yeah, I've only run the numbers since 2009. But it's basically 50-50 on the.
I'd be happy with
town
8
side.
years. But,
10 years is a nice round number.
yep.
All right, any other new business? Do we have any other updates from the school?
We haven't started working on the budget yet. We will be at the next meeting, so we'll be starting to provide updates after that.
Great, we got you the request for the new line item just in time. Anybody else? All right, we'll go to citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments? Ms. Katie, if you'd like to take the microphone, please.
There is something that's been happening historically with the town's budget that the Budget Committee does not see until the year after when it has happened. And that I speak of in raises that have been given out that were never approved in the budget. There's excess money, so then department heads come to the selectmen at a meeting and request that that 3% raise be given for the rest of the year, or a $5,000 raise be given till the end of the year. So unless you look at the selectmen's minutes for a year, you don't really know that the raises have been given. One of the things with 15 years on Budget Committee that bothers me is when we used to always vote the raises. And it's been going on for a few years now that I give us an example. The police chief came in and asked for 25 cents an hour and 50 cents an hour and 75 cents an hour for different officers in June, I believe it was. In November, we had the administrator say, rather than giving overtime based on a salaried position for the town clerk, if we gave a $5,000 raise, we would then be paying what he would receive, but not as much as if we paid overtime. So I think that, in my opinion, one of the things the Budget Committee should be asking is how many people received wages that increases that were not budgeted in the previous budget. It's excess money that they found in the budget to give a raise, or in Mr. Von Hassel's words, they found money. So I feel, as a citizen, anything we budget is what they ask for, unless we reduce it at town meeting or through the budgeting process. When they expend money somewheres that wasn't budgeted, I'll give you $53,000 to pave the parking lot at the town hall. Good move, it was excess money, the paving company was here, they could, and they did, but it was never budgeted. It wasn't something that was planned. Those are the kinds of things that a budget committee should be always taking into consideration when they're looking at budget. A few years ago, it was $220,000 to replace the heating systems at the school. Never budgeted. It was needed, but why wasn't it budgeted? If it was needed, why wasn't this something planned and put into the budget so the citizens would know? We all saw, more than likely, in the newspaper that the New Hampshire Municipal Association was ordered to pay back $53 million in health care. Then they were ordered to pay another $17 million. This is teachers. And they asked the supervisory union or the administrator, would you like to take a payment holiday? So the payment was paid for the next year with whatever was set aside from a payment holiday. In the town's budget, that's only the dental plan. But in the school, it was a lot more. Yet I didn't see a reduction in the health payment line because they had excess funds. These are things the Budget Committee has to know. And unless they read the court decisions in the newspaper, they don't know. Now, I just saw in the paper this week, another order has come out for $2.3 million to be returned. So these are, in New Hampshire Municipal's words, payment holidays. But where did that credit in the health or the dental line show up for us, the taxpayers? Where did you see it as a budget committee? Those are things I look at and I want you looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Katie.
Thank you. I think my request to the town administrator, if I can respond, is an attempt to do a bit of that, to find out what the unexpected expenses were and are. Not criticizing what's being done, but I'm looking at the process and saying, okay, well, the town hall, 53,000, it made sense. But shouldn't it require some part of, some sort of discussion or some sort of knowledge that this is going on? If you don't read the town minutes, you don't know. So I guess that was my attempt. My attempt is to find out, what in this budget and the budgets going forward, which will be determined, what these unanticipated expenditures were and how they were dealt with.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Verville.
I'll defer to Ms. Levesque.
On the paving, which looks fantastic, by the way, where did the excess funds come from, Jan? Was there money left over in the highway department that allowed us to do this, or?
The reconstruction of Griffin Road,
Oh.
due to the fact of the price of the oil and the blacktop, they had excess funds. And the board figured it was a good time to do it, and it was done.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Verville.
Well, I respect what Ms. Katie has to say. I would say that the salary adjustments probably are planned. They're planned and controlled by the select board that tend to choose to do that. I guess what I'll liberally describe as mid-year. And so generally speaking, by the time they appear into a budget that comes before the committee, the adjustments have already taken place. I agree, that's definitely the method that's been used the last several years.
And therefore, they show up in the default budget already.
And that is also correct. The default budget is adjusted to reflect those salary adjustments, so whichever budget goes through, it goes through. And historically, I believe Ms. Katie's correct, I'd have to pull the ballots, but I believe that it was the practice of the town to put those before the voters historically.
It was.
As everybody has seen, there has been a flurry of increases over the past month or two. So whether they're justified or not, I think they give the impression that you either use it or you lose it mentality. And I just think that perhaps presents the wrong image.
Okay, that's, anything else on that? I think we've pretty much spoken that one to death.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Position on those.
Absolutely don't want us.
Thank you all for coming. This goes in here.